On average, everyone poops 410 pounds a year, and it's got to go somewhere.
So, where does our waste actually go? To find out more about how black water turns into water clean enough to drink, we visited the Airport Parkway Wastewater Treatment Facility.
So from a wastewater facility, don't flush anything. That's basically it. Poop, pee, toilet paper. No flushable wipes. They're not flushable. Trust me, they cause trouble. Generally, most people have a trash can next to their toilet. You know, I know we're not all basketball experts, and it's a little smaller, but you can make the shot still ping in the can versus in the toilet. Don't send it down the toilet because you're damaging the environment. Wastewater had nothing to do with the environment until maybe the last 10 to 20 years. It's public health. That's why wastewater was put here. The source systems some of these are hundreds of years old throughout the system. There was a source system in Burlington. In Montpelier, 23% of the pipes are pre-1923. There was a source system, and all the stormwater was all pumped out of too. It all just went to the river. Well, in the 60s, the rivers were looking kind of crappy, literally, and they cobbed wastewater plants on the end of those pipes. It basically was an afterthought, and it was for public health. It was the original primary set of systems only cleaned it about 50%, but they chlorinated it. So it stopped infectious diseases. Obviously, you know, clean water is the #1 advancement of society. Sure, medical is great. You know, they made great advances in medicine and et cetera, but no, that pales compared to, you know, to clean water.
So our mission is to protect public health and to protect the environment. So public health, we do that through ensuring that the treated water that we purchase from the aqueduct is in fact clean to drink, and ensuring that by the time it reaches the customer, it is still clean to drink. We also protect public health on the wastewater side by ensuring that we don't put out, you know, various contaminants that might be in people's waste into the water. Luckily, the way the system was designed, there are no drinking water treatment plants downstream of us here, which gives us that extra level of security. But the waters are still used for what's called primary contact recreation. That means swimming, boating, as well as many other uses. So we want to ensure that what we're putting back is clean. We do that by, in terms of the public health component, chlorinating the water here and then dechlorinating it before we put it back out so that we don't also kill off all of the fish and good bacteria that are in the rivers. You know, if some wizard shows up and vanishes it out of sight, just the absence of blue plains in and of itself is a catastrophe for the city of Washington at the level of a major hurricane hitting it. I mean, literally, you could not use toilets anymore in the city of Washington. If you can't use a toilet, you really can't occupy that building for very long. So we would be talking about evacuating the city of Washington, D.C., and potentially the many of the suburbs as well. Our total population served here is over 2 million people. You would be talking about pumping raw sewage into the river and as a result, not using the river for anything.
Yeah, I think composting toilets make a lot of sense relative to waterborne toilets. I think that they're not what everyone would choose. So I think that just because they're different and they require more maintenance than a flush toilet, then that sets them apart. So I don't think that a composting toilet is something that we'll see everyone in the United States or everyone in the world be like, let's switch to that today. But I think they do make a lot of sense ecologically for sure, and then also practically. So particularly when there's a problem with water supply or wastewater disposal, they make a lot of sense, and in sensitive environments, they also are great. On Cape Cod, there was a study done recently looking at the nitrogen emissions from homes where people had a flush toilet and they switched to a composting toilet. And it was radical reduction. I think it was over 90% reduction of nitrogen that was emitted out of the septic tanks. So in these areas, nitrogen is very damaging to the coastal ponds. And so the composting toilets did a great job on handling that. And in a pretty inexpensive way compared to all these really expensive things you can put after your septic tank or add on sewers that take it all to a central plant. A composting toilet is just one device you install in a house, and that takes care of it right there.
How long does it take to pay off?
To pay this off?
Yeah.
Never. It's got too many maintenance costs. I mean, it's great, and it's, yeah.
These are extremely expensive things that we have here, these wastewater facilities, they're by far the most expensive thing a citizenry owns in their town, and they don't even know it's here.
This plant roughly has received about $10 billion of investment over the course of its existence, maybe a little bit more. Replacing it would require several years of construction effort and at least that much money, if not significantly more.
The upgrade here was $28 million in 2011. The upgrade. The replacement cost of this facility is $100 million. You can build a new high school by federal estimates from 20 to 30 million. 30 million gets you a really nice high school. No one even knows we're here. There's 8 people to run 2 facilities, 31 pump stations, and this is the cheap part.
But if eventually it got to that point where a town mostly was composting toilets, I think that what you would see is, for one thing, there'd be business opportunity in the servicing of them. It's more labor, less physical infrastructure. With composting toilets, it's small service jobs that would be sustained on an ongoing basis. So that's a positive thing for the economy. And then in terms of the environment and in terms of agriculture, you would have basically a fertilizer factory in town that was producing sustainable fertilizer that could then be managed.
Over time, these places will eventually all become, instead of energy sinks, they'll become energy producers. This is the very front side of it.
The main things we do here is separate liquids and solids. It's much easier to remove the larger solid particles than it is to treat them chemically with the bacteria that we use. So we settle out as much as we can before we turn the water over to the bacteria to remove the rest of the nitrogen and BOD.
All the bacteria then kind of goes in a circle. It gets here, it settles almost instantly to the bottom, and it goes right back in a loop again, around and around and around. We have to waste about 10% of the bacteria a day because their population keeps growing through sexual and asexual reproduction. I've tried other methods like pamphlets, just say no. Doesn't work, trust me.
We actually remove about 70% of the BOD and about half of the nutrients just through that settling process, which takes almost no energy, very few chemicals, and is quite quick and easy.
The biggest thing with owning a composting toilet is you have to maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, it won't work right. So like any system, has to be maintained. A sewer plant's maintained by the town or the municipality. The composting toilet is the responsibility of the homeowner. So that's important, and if the homeowner can't maintain it, then it's not a good fit. And then also they're mechanical systems, so they have parts that can wear out or fail over time, and so there is more responsibilities for the homeowner in having a composting toilet. On the upside, a good composting toilet never splashes, never clogs, and it doesn't actually smell like a flush toilet does.
That's the way it is. This is how society works, and these are really expensive things that you've seen now as you're going by, how complicated these are, how computerized these are. It's the most expensive, complicated thing you have in your town if you have a system. And that's why a lot of the smaller municipalities, they just can't afford to put them on a new system in. But I mean, the water we put out is of drinking water quality, so if you can, that's the way to go.
At the end of the day, nobody knows, to a first approximation, nobody knows that Blue Plains is here. Nobody knows that the wastewater is a much bigger component of the overall water industry than the drinking water.
The idea that sanitation is figured out, I think it's the same degree that we have transportation figured out. Like, we have ways to get around, but there are trade-offs, and there are environmental costs, and there are societal costs. And there's always new ways to try things. And another exciting thing about the research in this field is that it helps reset people's ideas about what's possible.
But our future generations, they're going to know what Vermont looks like, and what do you want to leave?
In 50, 100 years, where do we want this to be, and how can sanitation, instead of having an environmental impact and an economic cost, how can it have an environmental benefit and be something that actually provides an economic and physical resource?
The basic point is that people don't give a shit when they give a shit. And that would be the number one thing that we'd want to change.